Hi, my name is Bill Schaeffer, and this is another amazing true story. This really happened, but it happened a long time ago when I was 6 years old. So the memory is dim, but it was a family legend, a family story for a long time when I was growing up. I'm the oldest of three brothers, and my two brothers were both there, but one of them was 3 years old and the other one was 1 year old, so I doubt they really remember it. Now at the time, we were living in Wheaton, Illinois, on Pierce Street. Now this happened in about May, in the early part of summer, when I was 6 years old. My brother had been born the previous summer and was about 9 months old. The memory is somewhat dim, but the essential features stand out in my mind. My father was a salesman and had a company car, and he had just been transferred to Wheaton, Illinois, about 3 or 4 years earlier, and at the time had bought a brand new little square house. It was white with yellow trim. It was a brilliant white with yellow trim, a sunny, happy little house in a new small subdivision with tiny trees out in front and a big tree in the backyard. We had a gravel driveway along the side of which my mother had planted a flower bed. Now, every Sunday we went to church. My parents were contributing members of the community and wanted to be good, upstanding citizens, and the church was always very important to my mother. And we went to church every single Sunday. Even though my father was a musician and sometimes was out playing music gigs on Saturday night, we still all went to church. Now, this was a beautiful summer day, and it was sunny and bright, and we were driving home from church in my father's car, which I remember as being a blue Plymouth. Every 2 years he got a company car. And we lived on a slight hill. And as we're driving up the street to our house, the most remarkable thing greeted us. The house was dripping blood. It was unmistakable. There were red streaks dripping off of the siding that were about 2 inches wide and uniformly spaced all around the house that gave the appearance of the house was dripping blood. And it was a bright crimson red color that looked like it was dripping blood. My father was beside himself. We had just left for church 2 hours earlier, and there was no sign that there was anything wrong, and it was a beautiful sunny day. And we come back and we see this manifestation in our house. Needless to say, my father was very upset because he was a very proper man and very image conscious, and no one likes to live in a house that looks like it's dripping blood. So immediately he set about to repaint the house, and in fact the next weekend he started stripping all the paint off. He had some type of a scraper tool that was aluminum color with a red handle, and he used it to scrape all the painting off all the siding. And he worked really hard that weekend, and he scraped all the painting off down to the bare wood, and these were panels about 10 inches wide, siding, wood siding. And then the next weekend he repainted it white. Now the theory was that it was green wood, that the wood was not fully cured when it was put on the house, and sap had leached out of the boards, and since it got exposed to the air for a week and he repainted it, it would be fine. But then a week or two after that, the same thing happened. We were driving back from church, and we drive up the hill, and the house is dripping blood again, and it looks exactly the same. And my parents could not believe it. I couldn't believe it. Now, this again, they were bright red strips. They were kind of translucent, and about 2 inches wide, but they were the exact same strength of color with the same approximate spacing as in the previous time. And now my father had just repainted the house. And here the house was dripping blood again, and it needed to be repainted again. He was beside himself, and he couldn't believe it. And this was a terrible blow, because it meant he would have to work really hard again. So the next weekend he got out that same scraper, aluminum colored with a red handle, and scraped all the siding off. But this time he had asked some people about it, and he got a kind of a blowtorch. It was a black metal canister about this big around. I've seen them, they're old-fashioned, kind of a fire blow, and it would, I don't know what kind of kerosene maybe was in there, but it would shoot out a flame. And he went around the entire house and used that fire to scorch the wood and to dry out the sap that we thought was in there. So he scorched the wood, so he scraped all the paint off, and then he scorched the wood so it was visibly burnt a little bit, And the next weekend he painted the whole house again, white with yellow trim. At one point during this painting, I wanted to help my father because I was a young boy, and most boys idolize their fathers. I'll interject, my father was not particularly nice to me, and he was not a particularly good father. And I'll save those stories for another time. But this one story stands out in my mind because I begged him to let me help him paint. And he said, fine, you can paint this square here, and he gave me a little square to paint. And I was very proud that I painted it. And then when I was done, he just went shh, 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 painted over the whole thing. That was my dad. Thanks, Dad. Anyway, he painted the house and it was done. And finally, he painted the house a second time that summer. And it was a beautiful summer, as I remember. But I was only 6, so my memory is a little faded. Then, the most unbelievable thing happened. 1 or 2 weekends after that, when we came back from church again on a Sunday morning, and we drove the blue Plymouth Fury up the hill, the house was dripping blood for a 3rd time. And it looked exactly the same. The streaks were all 2 inches wide, and they were all about the same strength of red color, and there was about the same number of them, and it looked exactly the same. And my father went through the roof. He could not believe it. He had just painted his house entirely 2 times, and now he had to paint it a 3rd time. And he was absolutely certain this would not happen again. So he did a lot of research into methods for aerating the wood. And I remember that one of the ideas was these little round plastic holes that he could drill into the wood and put to let air in. And another idea was these aluminum spacers that you would pound up underneath the boards. And they were like little aluminum wedges that had a hole in them, kind of to let the wood breathe or something like that. So again, he took his aluminum scraper with the red handle, scraped all the paint off. He took the blowtorch, the kerosene, I guess, blowtorch, it was a black can, and he again just scorched the wood with that thing. And then he went around the entire house and pounded these little aluminum wedges up under the siding. He let it dry, and now by this time it's the end of summer. It's like August. And he painted the house 1 more time. And this was a lot of work. It was a very busy summer for my father. I didn't volunteer to help him this time. Thanks, Dad. But this was the last time. And the house never dripped blood again. Now the curious thing is, that my parents sold that house when I was in 4th grade, so I must have been about 10 or so. And when I was in 4th grade, we moved 2 blocks away to Vernon Street. And we got a house with red aluminum siding. And I remember it was very important to my father to get aluminum siding because he never ever wanted to paint a house ever again. And I suppose they got red so that if something like that happened again, it would not be seen. But as time went on, the story was forgotten about, and I forgot about it myself with the busyness of growing up and the challenge of going through junior high and high school and navigating my way through life. But as an adult, when I sit back and think about it, it is an absolutely bizarre true story. I have never ever heard of a phenomenon like this except for stigmata, or sometimes statues drip blood as a holy relic. I've never heard of a house dripping blood. And yet, I saw it. I don't know if it was a supernatural manifestation or not, but there were several things that make it seem like it was. First off, it was absolutely unprecedented, and it always occurred while we were at church, with no warning at all. Secondly, each of the 3 times, the marks on the siding were the same strength and same width and the same density of marks. And if it had been sap slowly leaching out of the boards, by the 3rd time, it would have been a lot fainter and a lot less profuse. But that's not my memory. My memory is it looked identically the same each of the 3 times. Now my parents, being very practical people despite the fact that they went to church, were sure that it was because Scott had some croup or pneumonia and they were running a humidifier in his bedroom, and this humidity got in the attic and caused the siding to leach this sap color. And that doesn't make sense either, because all houses have a moisture barrier. Moisture does not come from the outside in, and moisture does not go from the inside out. So, unfortunately, no one took a photograph of it, because I would love to see a photograph of it, and if it had been my house, even though I had to paint it, I would have photographed it, because I love things that are strange and bizarre and unusual. But my parents were very conservative and liked everything being ordinary and normal and predictable. And this was absolutely unacceptable. So that's the story of the house that dripped blood. It is an absolutely true story. It happened 3 times in succession the summer that I was 6 years old. Thank you, and leave your comments below.